When you hear the phrase serial killer, the names of criminals that come to mind are difficult to call people, knowing what they did. But history also knows more terrible cases when children became ruthless killers. One of them is the story of Mary Bell, an 11-year-old British girl who was sentenced to life imprisonment in 1968. This little girl you're looking at right now was convicted in December 1968 after she confessed to multiple murders. She was only 10 when she committed her first crime. How could a child with an angelic appearance become a killer? In May 1957, in Newcastle, England, a 16-year-old prostitute named Betty Bell gave birth to a baby girl. Her mother often left her children to fend for themselves. Mary was the eldest of 4 siblings. For unknown reasons, the mother, being completely devoid of maternal instinct, did not abandon the child. Life would be much better in Mary's shelter than in my parents' home. Mary lived with her mother in the poor, depressed area of Scotswood, built up with townhouses built in the 19th century. They began to be demolished to make way for modern residential buildings, which is why local children often played in those houses that were occupied but not demolished, or played in the vacant lots created after the demolition of the houses. Mary's mother had mental problems. For example, for many years she refused to eat with her family unless food was placed in a corner under her chair. Betty McCricket was a careless, or more prominently can be said as a cruel mother. She frequently traveled to Glasgow for professional reasons, recklessly living her children under their father's supervision, who was a seasoned convict and most of the time got absent. Mary was an unwanted child, and before her birth, Betty made an unsuccessful attempt to poison herself with pills. As a child, Mary was repeatedly injured from domestic accidents when she was left alone with her mother. The mother tried to kill her daughter and tried to do it so that Mary's death turned out to be an accident. One day, around 1960, Betty simply threw her daughter out of the first-floor window. One independent witness admitted that he saw Betty giving her daughter sleeping pills under the guise of candy. She tried to sell her daughter when she was still a baby to a mentally unstable woman who could not have children of her own. When Mary was going through the tender years of 4 or 5, Betty's clients used to assault her sexually. From an early age, Mary learned to attract people's sympathy with her angelic face. However, at school her behavior was completely different. She was aggressive towards other children, lied constantly, and deliberately damaged things that belonged to her classmates and teachers. Despite family members' attempts to help Betty's children, Mary was emotionally cold and distant. She had an inexhaustible imagination, and the stories she came up with seemed completely believable. Mary also showed interest in religion, reading the Bible and expressing a desire to enter a monastery. At the time of the events described, Mary was studying at De Laval Road School. Mary attacked other children, both girls and boys, whom she tried to strangle, committed acts of vandalism, and repeatedly showed signs of disturbing behavior, including sudden mood swings or chronic sleep incontinence. One of Mary's classmates later testified that by that time they had all become accustomed to Mary's unpredictable behavior, to the point that they had learned to determine from her motor skills alone that Mary intended to attack one of them. Because of this, other children were very reluctant to play with Mary, and the only one with whom she had a friendly relationship was the 13-year-old daughter of their neighbor Norma Joyce Bell, 1955 to 1989. The girls were namesakes. There was no relationship between them. But everything changed in 1968, when Mary was only 11 years old. Mary played with her friend Norma, who had mental retardation, and a 3-year-old neighbor's child. The child allegedly fell from the roof and received serious injuries and miraculously survived. Then no one could have thought that she was to blame. Later, 3 women went to the police, saying that Mary tried to strangle their 6-year-old children. The police had an educational conversation with Mary, but children are children, and pranks are common to them. At the end of May 1968, the body of 4-year-old Martin Brown was found in the basement of an abandoned building. The day before the funeral, Mary came to the Brown house and asked Mrs. Brown to look at the child's body in the coffin. The heartbroken mother did not attach any importance to this. On May 26, 1968, when she was 11 years old, she attacked Norma's younger sister. She behaved so cruelly and inappropriately that Norma's father had to kick her out of the house. One day, she attacked and scratched her best friend Norma in the face and kicked her in the head. After completing the attack, she said that she was ready to kill again. The girls snuck into a preschool in Woodland Crescent. They entered through the slate roof, tearing off the tiles, and destroyed it, tearing up books. They overturned tables and smeared ink and poster paints everywhere. When they left behind 4 different inscriptions of strange content with grammatical errors. The police again did not take this seriously and considered it hooliganism. 2 months after the death of Martin Brown, 3-year-old Brian Howe went missing and was soon found strangled. The letter M was carved on his stomach and an N on his arm. Brian's body was found between 2 large concrete blocks in a vacant lot near the railway line. The first policeman to arrive at the scene noticed that they had tried to hide the body by throwing tufts of grass and uprooted weeds on top. Cyanosis was visible on the child's lips, and there were several bruises and scratches on his neck. A pair of broken scissors lay nearby. There were numerous puncture wounds on his legs, locks of hair were cut off from his head, and his genitals were partially mutilated. Based on an analysis of the wounds, investigators were able to establish that the killer did not have great physical strength and therefore was not an adult. The discovery of Brian Howe's body sparked a large-scale manhunt. More than 100 detectives from across Northumberland were involved in the investigation. By August 2nd, more than 1,200 children had been interrogated. Norma and Mary were questioned on August 1st. During the interrogation, Norma showed agitation, while Mary was attentive but silent. Although both girls were evasive and contradictory in their initial statements, they freely admitted to playing with Brian on the day of his death, but denied seeing him that afternoon. The next day, Mary was questioned again and said that on July 31st she saw a local 8-year-old boy playing with Brian and hitting him several times. In addition, she stated that she also remembered that the boy was covered in grass and weeds, as if he had been rolling around in a field, and that he had a small pair of scissors with him. Then Mary reported that she once saw this boy try to cut off the cat's tail with these scissors, but failed because the scissors were broken. As soon as Detective Chief Inspector James Dobson read Mary's testimony, he immediately came to the conclusion that Mary may be the killer. The 8-year-old boy Mary spoke about was quickly questioned, and he had a strong alibi for July 31st. And only the police knew about the presence of broken scissors at the murder scene. Norma was interrogated again, and she confessed to everything. According to the Norm, Mary said that she liked to strangle children and mutilate the body of a 3-year-old child. The girls accused each other of murder. Mary was interrogated, and although she acted like a literate adult during the interrogation, she was eventually found guilty of 2 murders and several counts of violence. She later claimed that she did them just for fun. On December 17, 1968, at the Newcastle Assizes, Norma Bell was acquitted and Mary Bell was convicted of 2 counts of manslaughter with the mitigating factor of diminished responsibility. This circumstance was the diagnosis of court-appointed psychiatrists, a psychopathic deviation, the symptoms of which are a lack of remorse for the actions committed and an inability to plan their consequences. Mary was sentenced to life imprisonment and sent to serve her sentence at Moore Court. In 1980, she was amnestied and released at the age of 23 with a new name and documents. For years later, Mary gave birth to a daughter, but after media attention she and the child moved from Cumberlow, and all traces of her were lost. All we know is that she also ensured anonymity for her daughter. When Bella's granddaughter was born in 2009, the killer also won the child's right to anonymity. Regardless of the cause, Mary's actions had a profound impact on those around her, especially the families of her victims. The fact that such violence could be committed by a child is shocking and horrifying and raises important questions about how society should respond to such crimes. Share your thoughts what you think about this.